Good morning. Being 9 a.m., I'll call to order the McHenry County Board Committee of the Whole meeting of June 12, 2025, and Mr. Smith will lead us in the pledge today.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Kathy, could you please call the roll?
Carolyn Campbell. Here. John Collins. Here. Joseph Gottemoller. Here. Terry Greeno. Here. Eric Hendricks.
Here.
Carl Kaminsky.
Present.
James Kearns.
Here.
Dina Krager. Here. Matthew Kunkel. Here. Brian Sager.
Here.
Michael Shorten. Michael Scala.
Present.
Larry Smith.
Here.
Patrick Sullivan.
Here.
Paul Thomas.
Here.
Gloria Van Hoff.
Present.
Tracy Von Bergen.
Here.
Chairman Bueller.
Here. I'll entertain a motion to allow Mr. Hendricks, Mr. Kearns, and Ms. Von Bergen to attend remotely. Ms. Altoff makes the motion. Mr. Sager seconds. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Good morning. I have a handful of remarks before we receive the presentation on the development of the 2026 budget and review the agenda for next Tuesday's voting meeting. On Thursday, June 5th, County Administrator Pete Austin and I had the pleasure of joining McHenry County Economic Development Corporation Executive Director Mark Picos in getting a tour of General Kinematics in Crystal Lake with our friends at World Business Chicago. Attendees included World Business Chicago President and CEO Phil Clement, Chief Growth Officer Kyle Schultz, and representatives from the city of Crystal Lake. As you know, the World Business Chicago brought together McHenry County, the Collar Counties, and Cook County, and the city of Chicago into the Greater Chicagoland Economic Partnership, which unites our efforts to draw new businesses and investment by touting our unmatched combined infrastructure, economy, and skilled workforce. This kind of collaboration fosters an environment that encourages such expansion, adding more jobs and opportunities. We're working together with GSEP to determine our next phase of growth, development, and collaboration, and we're proud to be with such an important partner. And thank you to World Business Chicago for coming to visit, and thank you to General Kinematics and Project Management Group Vice President Randy Smith in particular for graciously hosting us. The following day, Friday, June 6th, Senator Dick Durbin came to our tour of the Hackmatack National Wildlife Refuge to celebrate the recent addition of the 1,000-acre Tamarack Farms. What started 13 years ago with a single 12-acre conservation easement has grown to thousands of acres throughout McHenry County and Walworth County, Wisconsin, that will further draw visitors and boost our growing tourism and recreation economy. Congratulations are in order to the Open Lands Project, the McHenry County Conservation District, Friends of Hackmatack, the Conservation Fund, and Illinois Audubon Society for reaching this milestone. House Bill 3363 passed along party lines in the final days of the General Assembly spring session that ended May 31st. The bill, if signed into law by Governor Pritzker, will create a state public defender office to develop standards for local public defenders, provide attorneys and tools for litigation, and funding for improvements for the defense of litigants subject to appropriation. We oppose this bill because it removes local control. Under the legislation, McHenry County Court judges lose their ability to appoint public defenders. Defenders will be nominated by a committee comprised of chief judge and state public defender representatives, and final appointments will be made by the state commission instead of the judges of our circuit. We also do not get a say in the makeup of the commission, which will be appointed by the governor, General Assembly leadership, and public defense stakeholders. Should the governor sign the bill, the commission will be created by July 1st of next year, with the changes taking effect in 2027. The spring session ended without action on proposals to fund mass transit or alter the makeup of our mass transit boards. Governor Pritzker and legislative leaders have pledged to work on the issue through the summer prior to the fall veto session to stave off surface cuts and layoffs amid public transit agencies facing a fiscal cliff. Again, I have joined my fellow Collier County Board chairs in working to ensure that any change to Mass Transit Board governance includes fair and balanced representation for McHenry, DuPage, Lake, Kane, and Will counties. You'll find a copy of the McHenry County Popular Annual Financial Report on your desks, and for everyone watching at home, you can find the report for the 2024 fiscal year on the Finance Department page on the county website, as well as our social media pages, which in recent days has linked directly to it. The 16-page report is an easy-to-understand view of the county budget written for the public. It's clear, concise, and it looks great. So thank you to CFO Carrie Weiss, Accounting Manager Dodi Venisi, and the rest of finance staff for their hard work. And finally, I'd like to close by inviting members of the public to join me at the Lake Atwood in the Hollows Conservation Area this Saturday, June 14th at 10 a.m. The McHenry County Conservation District is celebrating the reopening of the lake with its newly paved and accessible path, fishing pier, and kayak launch. County board members, you will receive a sneak peek of the improvements this evening, but you are also encouraged to attend with me on Saturday as well. And if I've said it once, I've said it 1,000 times, McHenry County Conservation District properties are second to none. And I encourage you all to explore what they have to offer. So thank you. That's all I have this morning. Do any members have comments this morning? Seeing none, we have public comment next. Okay, public comment is your opportunity to address the board. Each person who has indicated on a sign-in sheet that they would like to speak will be given 3 minutes to do so. If the red light comes on in front of me, you will be asked to please summarize your comments. And looks like there's quite a few comments on one particular topic today, so I would ask in the interest of time, if a comment preceding yours mentions something you were going to say, I would respectfully ask you to consider refraining from repeating what others have also already stated. So first we have Stacy Lindsay, followed by Laura Kespa.
I'm here just to say my piece about the slaughterhouse proposal on Nelson Road. We didn't get a lot of notice. I didn't know anything about it, though I am a neighbor. It's right across the field from this. A lot of people haven't gotten much notice. I was actually here last week at a meeting, and I was told the 17th was the public hearing. But anyway, throwing this together. So as far as a zoning change, I went through the previous meetings line by line through the transcripts. The criteria set forth in the McHenry County Unified Development Ordinance by which a zoning amendment, conditional use, or variation is considered. It is the petitioner's responsibility to present clear and convincing evidence in the public hearing to establish the standards have been met, the 10 standards. So they haven't been met. One of them, what clear and convincing evidence was presented to show that the build and operation of a commercial slaughterhouse, this is not a mom and pop operation. It is a commercial slaughterhouse. What evidence was shown that it would not interfere with the use and enjoyment of the homeowners in the area of our properties? We pay residential taxes. They're fairly high. I just cut a check for 15 grand. If I hadn't done that, I might have been able to afford a lawyer too. But I purchased my property under the existing zoning, ag and residential, to enjoy that property with my family. We sit out at night, we watch the stars, we feed our fish in our pond. You know, we have extensive health issues in our family under COVID issues. That's why we bought our property. It took me a year to find it. It took me another year just to purchase it. Wasn't easy. And it was under the zoning of Ag 1 and residential. I've met a lot of my neighbors. I love walking around my property. I don't want to smell a slaughterhouse. I don't want to hear animals scream for help, which is what happens. This is not an appropriate use of our community. Heartland, the township, said no. And under the existing residential and Ag 1 zoning, the answer is no.
If you could summarize your comments, please.
Without involving the neighbors in the area, why would this even be considered? There's no reason for it. Thank you.
Laura Sepka, followed by Chuck Canoes.
Thank you. Good morning. I am not anti-business or anti-slaughter. I had a long career in the meat business. I am very proud of McHenry County's agricultural and rural lifestyle, which is why I choose to live here. My family and I have owned and resided on the adjacent property to the Nelson Road property on the east side for 24 years. This is not an isolated area. There are 3 residences located within 15 feet of the parcel. This does not comply with standard number 1, HH1. The UDO clearly states, quote, "No animal slaughter operation may be located on a parcel within 500 feet of any residential zoning district or residential structure located in an agricultural zoning district." The community is home to approximately 100 residents within 1 mile of the parcel and an additional 80+ at Valley High Nursing Home. That is located 1,320 feet away from the parcel's property line. We are vulnerable to water depletion. The petitioners did not offer independent expert testimony on this subject as they were required to by the ZBA. Government and industry data, one source being Texas A&M University, shows that sheep and goats require 28.5 gallons of water per animal for the total slaughter process. This is approximately equivalent to 7 Heartland Township homes. The petitioners testified that they will be slaughtering 500 animals per week. The loud noise from continuously running commercial refrigeration units will violate McHenry County's noise ordinance. The petitioners did not offer a solution or any assurance that they would comply or try to mitigate that noise. A commercial slaughterhouse needs to be located in an industrial area where unlimited water is accessible, noise, air pollution, and odors can be contained. Standards 3 and 4 have not been met. Will the petitioners be required to carry enough liability insurance to cover damages stemming from neglect, polluting groundwater, for example? Will a surety bond be required? The petitioners have a history of multiple violations at the Harvard Slaughterhouse. Will there be conditions on hours of operation, tank pumpings, manure removal? Does the county have the resources to enforce these ordinances? This is a privately owned commercial business. The CUP will only benefit the petitioners at the expense of the residents, which are numerous in the area. There are too many unknowns. More scrutiny needs to be applied to these slaughterhouses that are coming into McHenry County. I respectfully ask the board to deny the approval. I also want to be on the record. The official site plan dated
Summarize your comments, please.
I want to be on the record. The official site plan dated 4/11/25 is not consistent with the application for the CUP or the legal description of the petition. The text and graphics were amended after public testimony was closed on 3/27/25. Thank you so much for your time today.
Chuck Canoes, followed by Steve Kuda.
My name is Chuck Cruzy. I'm the Heartland Township Supervisor. Not that that means a whole lot in this world anymore. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen of the board. listening to Mr. Bueller this morning talking about business, and as Laurel mentioned, we are not anti-business in Heartland Township. We appreciate the business that we have in the industrial area that we have. We have this slaughterhouse that is proposed, and there's been a lot said about farm-to-table enterprises. This is neither farm nor table. This is a commercial enterprise that imports livestock from far away as Kansas and eastern Colorado. I have personally seen the semis in there several times unloading the sheep. The product that he harvests and processes goes out in boxes, not to people in McHenry County, but most of it goes to east of here to Chicago, where the big population is that consumes this product. As Laurel also mentioned, the water use is something I'm very concerned about. We're in the middle of a drought right now. And one of the things that people don't realize, that we're all on the same aquifer in Heartland Township. If they start using this and using more water, i.e., we could end up having a lot of dry wells. And one of the big problems I could see for the county, their Spotlight nursing home is less than a quarter mile away, and they're on the same aquifer as this proposed slaughterhouse. If there was ever any pollution, environmental spill or whatever, I would hate to think what would happen to some of the most vulnerable people in our county, those people that are the 100 to 80 to 100 people that are the normal residents of the nursing home. It's very simple. This belongs in an industrial area. We have an industrial area in our township even, off of Washington Street. There's vacant lots in that would be serviced by Woodstock City and water. It's very simple, ladies and gentlemen. I would ask you to deny this for the simple reason it just flat doesn't belong on this parcel in the agricultural area. Thank you.
Steve Kuda, followed by Tyler Wilkie.
Good morning. My name is Steve Kuda. I'm an attorney in Woodstock, Illinois, and I'm here representing Heartland Township and its supervisor, Charles Cruz. Heartland Township objects to the proposed conditional use requested by Elegoo Farm Meatpacking Incorporated on its 8.2-acre parcel on Nelson Road. In order to obtain a conditional use, a petitioner must demonstrate his ability to meet the general standards and specific standards for a food processing plant set forth in your Unified Development Ordinance. We do not believe the petitioner has met those standards, and it is the burden of the petitioner to prove that he can meet all the ordinance requirements for conditional use and not the burden of objectors to disprove them. Other than the infrequent slaughter of 4-H animals from time to time, almost all petitioners' production is for out-of-county businesses. The public interest of Heartland Township is not served by this proposed use. A food processing plant which anticipates slaughtering up to 500 animals per week is not a small and unobtrusive operation. By Mr. Olegoo's own admission, almost all the slaughtered livestock comes from out of county, and almost none of the finished product is sold to McHenry County businesses, and none is sold to its residences. From January 1st, 2019 through March 31st, 2023, petitioner was cited over 39 times for violations at its former slaughterhouse by the Department of Agriculture. While petitioner repeatedly stated he will comply with applicable county, state, and federal rules and regulation, history indicates that he was unable to do so in the past. The United Development Ordinance provides that as a matter of right and without a conditional use permit, petitioner could operate his proposed plant on property zoned industrial. At the January 30th ZBA hearing, Mr. Olegoo admitted that he has never even looked at parcels which are zoned industrial. Had he done so and purchased an industrial zone property, none of us would be here today. The primary job of the county board members is to protect the interests of the residents of McHenry County. For the most part, the folks who live in Heartland Township experience a peaceful, rural, and farming environment. There is no one here today who believes that the operation of a slaughterhouse, which would process up to 500 animals per week, would enhance or even maintain the present environment of the Heartland Township residents. It would be inappropriate to approve a conditional use which provides no benefit to the vast majority of McHenry County residents. Under all these circumstances, Heartland Township respectfully requests that the petition for conditional use requested by Oligoo Farms be denied. Thank you very much.
Tyler Wilkie, followed by Nick Jacob.
Good morning, board members and Mr. Chairman. My name is Tyler Wilkie. I'm the attorney for the petitioners, Alage Farm Meats. The Alages are here with us today and have been operating in the meat packing business for some years now. They were operating out of the old Jones Pack, which was up in Lawrence. They experienced a fire a few years ago, wanted to rebuild on that site where it had been for 50 years, and because of the changing surrounding uses, they were told they were unable to rebuild on that site. As such, they looked to this other property on Nielsen Road, which they own. And the code allows for the A1 conditional use permit for the food processing and animal slaughter. The proposal is for an approximately 9,000 square foot building with all slaughter to be done indoors, which is with the code, in accordance with the code. We believe we've met the standards from approval, both the general and the specific standards. We come to you today with a 5-2 recommendation from the Zoning Board of Appeals that we have met those standards. The petitioners have since had clarification on the conditions from staff and continue to affirm and agree to comply with those conditions. The meatpacking industry is a highly regulated one, with an inspector on site daily. In that scenario, there's always something to be found, something to be done better. But Mr. Alage affirms that he runs a clean plant. He runs a safe plant. I'd ask you to review the ZBA findings and the testimony from those hearings. And we look forward to your support to allow for this development and to allow for the local packing of lambs, goats, and beef. Thank you.
Nick Jacob, followed by Rich Lindsay.
Hello, my name is Nick Jacob. I live at 14815 Lilac Lane in Woodstock. I'm here about the slaughterhouse. Per the transcript from the zoning board meeting, the final comment by the chairperson was, "This will be an enforcement nightmare." Now, there's an officer, police officer, sitting in the back of the room. He knows exactly what guides him in his enforcement of laws. Is this what we want for McHenry Township, an enforcement nightmare? I mean, that's just, it sounds crazy to me. That I can't believe that it went through the zoning board, but it did. And so I'm here for you to deny this application just on the mere fact that it will be an enforcement nightmare. Thank you.
Rich Lindsay.
Good morning. We're playing catch-up on this. We found out about the hearings in the late stage. Otherwise, it probably never would have made it here. We got over 400 signatures against this. And as a homeowner in Heartland Township, I'm thoroughly against it. My biggest concern is once you grant this, if you do, what's to stop this from expanding? There are vacant properties next to and behind this operation. A 9,000 square foot building. It's big. And what's to stop this from being a huge operation in McHenry County, which is totally inappropriate in our area? I wish she would deny this. Thank you.
That concludes our public comment for today. Under reports and presentations today, we have Finance Chair Mike Scala and Chief Financial Officer Carrie Wise to present the fiscal year 26 budget development.
Good morning, everyone. I first want to thank Carrie for putting this presentation together and for her department to put all the numbers together and for the rest of the staff that worked on this. A lot of hours went into this presentation. It's something that we're doing which is a little bit different than we've done in the past. So for you new board members, typically this budget meeting would be happening in August, September timeframe. And going through the last several budget cycles, there was a lot of concern by board members that they weren't getting enough information early enough. And so, although this is early and we have some preliminary data in these charts and everything you'll see, we still wanted to have the discussion early to not only give you information, but allow you time to ask questions, either at this meeting or even after the meeting, not only about process, but about what numbers mean and the direction that we're going. The other thing that I'm hoping to try and achieve is talking about the levy and what we want to do as a board in giving direction to staff. So one of the things that I've heard board members say is that they get really frustrated at our November board meeting where, you know, people are trying to make amendments, people are trying to change what was already recommended. And so on both sides of the equation, it's not, I'm not trying to pick on any one side, it just kind of becomes a cluster. And board members are disappointed in that because it becomes a situation where people don't really understand what's being asked. And so I'm trying to avoid that. Really, this whole presentation is to try and avoid that. So we're looking at trying to provide direction from the board to staff about what direction we want to go at the end of this meeting. And part of that, part of that is looking at our budget policy. And so our budget policy is very clear. It provides 5 different scenarios in regard to what we should be doing as far as our levy goes for property taxes. And part of my concern is that we have meetings, so again for new board members, we have meetings, budget meetings at each of the committees that we have. And so the liaison departments that report to those committees come before you and present their budgets, and ultimately you as a committee then approve moving that on forward, that whatever that budget is. And you know, for the last 12 years I've been here, those have evolved as to what those were. And again, I think we need to evolve them further, because ultimately, if the board says we want a certain direction, whatever that is, to me it's important that the hearings that you have from the department heads or elected officials at your committee then reflect what that direction is. It's not fair to staff to come back and try and think about what we want. It's better for us to tell them what we want and then come forward and fit into that mold, whatever that mold is. So I'm hoping that this new approach works. If it doesn't, hey, we got next year, we'll try it all over again. But to me, process change is important because it makes the process better. And even as board members change and board members want different processes, we still need to be flexible. But again, it's our job to provide direction to staff, you know, set policy. That's what we're here for. And so if we can do that earlier, it makes their job better and it gives us better information so that we can make better decisions. So that's kind of what today is all about. Carrie has spent a lot of time with this stuff. She even wrote it on her kid's little notebook here. I mean, yeah, she's resourceful. She's been really working hard. So I will let her take it over from here.
Okay, so before we get started into the budget and levy discussions, this is really for the new board members or the newer board members, just based on some of the questions that I've received. I want to make sure that we go through some of the basic definitions or terms that you may hear us saying over and over again. So especially because government accounting is quite different from accounting you may have learned in school or in the private sector. So first we're going to talk about governmental funds, very high level. So these funds are used to account for government activities. And we have those broken down into the general fund, which is our main fund. It's used to the day-to-day operations. And the money comes from the least restricted source. So taxes, sales tax, property tax. So really we spend a lot of time on the general fund because it has the most decision points, because it really has the least amount of restrictions. But we also have special funds. And so the special revenue funds are specific revenue, and that revenue is restricted for use. So I think as we go through the whole budget process, kind of keeping in mind that all the funds really function in silos. Per the policy, every fund has to be balanced. Every fund has to have an identified source of revenue, whether that's a specific revenue or using fund balance in order to cover their expenses. So breaking that down a little bit more, the general fund, when I say that, the main operating fund of the county, this slide is a little bit busy on purpose because I wanted you to kind of see all of the things that covers when I say general fund. It's all the support departments like purchasing, the auditor's office, facilities, IT, and then we support the operating departments, planning and development, health department, sheriff, the courts, state's attorney, so on. So you can see that this is a large fund that covers a lot of our day-to-day operations.
I just want to interject real quick. So we talked about this. If you have questions about a specific slide, please ask those when we're on that slide so we can get those clarified before we move on to the next slide, okay?
Any questions so far? The general fund. Okay, so the special revenue funds. The county actually has 43
Hey, look at those silos right there. McHenry County silos, and this was on purpose, so this is subliminal messaging we got going on here.
So we have 43 different special revenue funds. So they're in your budget document, they're in your financial report. I think I gave you guys a handout, I can send it again. That gives you like a little sentence about what those special revenue funds do. But I wanted to just highlight some of our larger special revenue funds, or also even some of the smaller ones, so you can kind of see all the different types of programs and services that these special revenue funds cover. And in a little bit, we're going to talk about, even though they do function, as I said earlier, in silos, we're going to talk.
Closer.
Just eat it. Just eat it. It's on. No, it's on.
Closer. There you go.
We're going to talk about how they can have impact on some of the other funds, specifically the general fund. So the last group of funds is enterprise funds. We have 2 of those. So these, if you look in the financial reports, these are accounted for and reported like a regular business. So they have fees and charges that cover their expenses. So our 2 enterprise funds are Valley High and E911, or the ETSB fund. And again, same thing, these function on their own. We can't move money to or from. So now that we talked a little bit about the funds, which departments rolls up into those funds, I want to talk a little bit about how those funds relate to the budget as a whole. So if you look here on this slide, a lot of our discussion is centered around the general fund. And as I said earlier, that's because that's really the primary decision points. But in the fiscal year 25 total budget, about 60% of the total revenue is made up of the special funds and the enterprise funds. So again, just keeping in mind that even though the discussion seems to focus on property taxes or general fund, the budget, it actually encompasses, a lot more. So breaking that down further, if you take that revenue and put it into categories, you can see here, again, the main thing we talk about is property taxes, and with good point, because that's really the most reliable, predictable source of our revenue. But again, in our total revenue, for all the funds, it's only 24% of our total revenue source. So this chart is revenue categories specifically for the general fund. So again, I want to kind of focus on the property taxes is 37% of the general fund's revenue source. So, you know, again, for how much we focus our discussion specifically on the levy, you know, I want to make sure that you guys are aware that it's just one piece of the whole budget and the whole puzzle. So lastly, this is the property tax levy and how it's divided out by fund. So last year the total extension was just under 65 million, and that 65 million gets divided out into 10 different levies. So you can see here the general fund receives 61% of that total, but each year as we go through and we figure out the final budget numbers, we present to you the way we think that 65 million needs to get divided out by funds. And I think that's important to remember as we go forward, because as you saw in the previous slide, the general fund, only 37% of its revenue is from property taxes. But some of these other funds, IMRF, Highway, Tort, FICA, VAC, and Senior Services, property taxes are those funds' only source of revenue, outside of a little bit of interest income. So that's where, when we talk in a little bit about the impact of the funds amongst themselves, is really where it breaks down to, you know, we have IMRF, FICA, and VAC that have not been funded at a high enough level to meet their operations. So we'll talk about what to do about that and then the impact to that on the general fund.
Let me interject real quick. So, analogy, this is a pie, right? And we get a whole pie, but we as a board can decide how big of a slice of that pie goes to each one of these different funds. It's still the same pie, there's still the same amount of dollars, but we can divide it up. And that's the balancing act, because if you give some money to a fund that needs more, you're taking it away from some other location. And so we set that every single year based on recommendation from staff, but ultimately we can shift money on different pieces of that pie. So that we're going to talk a lot more about that later, but this is a critical component to making sure that funds are healthy. So.
Yes, Terry.
So you know how Donna has the property tax bill now, where when someone receives their bill, there's a phone number so that they can call that taxing body and talk to them about information that they may need to know, why their plywood pole barn with a aluminum roof is being assessed, you know, at a value of $200,000. Oh my gosh, sorry. Yeah. So is there a way, because some of these things taxpayers would want to know, well, how much control do we have over the people that, you know, if 100% of these funds, you know, like IMRF and all of that, how much control do I have as a taxpayer have over who I elected to hire these people, or how many of these positions are being mandated by the state or federal government and I have no say, but yet I have to pay this out of my property taxes? I mean, these are real questions that people should know. And how would they even find out, you know? So
is the question mandated programming versus?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's, again, something we'll talk about later, because that is a critical component to,
Mm-hmm.
again, the direction that we're headed.
Okay.
And I think it's important that whenever liaison, whether it's an elected official or a department head comes before the different committees, that's one of the things that I think is going to be critical, that they explain to that committee, hey, these are all mandated programs that we have to do to answer your question. And then these are the things that, as a board, past boards have decided that they wanted to do or needed to do, and do we want to continue still doing that?
Thank you.
So last week at the Finance and Audit Committee,
It was a great committee meeting.
for those of you that are not on that committee, if you want to go back and listen, we had our external auditor, Baker Tilly, present the results of our fiscal year 24 audit. So, and I think they do a really good job of breaking down the information so it's easy to understand, especially in context of the financial report, which could be a difficult document to understand. But where we finished fiscal year 24, the unrestricted general fund balance was just under 57 million. Now this was a decline from fiscal year 23, but if you remember in the past several years, our budget discussions, we had talked about using some of that excess reserve strategically to fund some of the capital improvement programs that were either underfunded or had been put on hold. And I think we've done a really good job of that, as you can see, the parking lot.
So using these funds for one-time expenses, not reoccurring expenses, because that's key. We don't want to be using reserves to do reoccurring expenses because we're going to get screwed in future years. So
right. So it's finding the balance of, how do you strategically spend down that reserve appropriately while also planning for the future. Okay. So another term that you'll hear a lot is months of reserve. So what exactly does that mean, and how is it calculated? So if you look in the 2024 column, here is and this is just for the general fund, just under 57 million is the unrestricted fund balance. The number right below that is the 2025 operating budget for the general fund. So that per month is just under 8.9 million. So really that 6.4 is just how many months, if we had all revenue stop coming in, how many months could we cover the $8.9 million in expenses? So that's where we come up with the 6.4. And this is where you can see we have been doing the planned spend down. I think the important thing on this slide is this blue represents the unrestricted fund balance, which you can see has remained fairly level. The orange represents the operating expenses, which has been increasing. And so it's the two of those numbers that make up our month of reserve. And now some of this orange includes funding for the capital plan, but it also includes some pretty significant increases in our recurring expenses like personnel, where we saw an 8% increase from 23 to 24. So those are the kinds of numbers that we have to, we kind of pull out capital because that's our planned spend down, but then try to focus on those recurring expenses, and if this continues to increase and this stays level, then we get to a point where our months of reserve and this model becomes unsustainable.
Hold on a second. That's an important point you just made.
Any questions on that?
Well, no, but we need to make that point very clear. So again, as we continue to talk about direction and planning, when our reoccurring expenses, and again, I'm not so worried about our one-time expenses because we manage that. We decide by resolution, we're going to do the parking lot or we're going to buy whatever. So those aren't as critical as the reoccurring. And so when you look at our reoccurring, that is critical to what our month's reserves are or have been going. And so, yes, our budget policy clearly states 5 months of reserve. When I first got on the board, it was actually 6 months. And then probably 2 years after I got on the board, it was determined that we would change it from 6 to 5. So it's been 5 for probably 10 years, I would guess. And it's gone up or down, you know, based on how things have transpired at the end of every year. But with our expenses continuing to go up, personnel being the largest, you know, we are going to have a hard time taking it to 5 months and then maintaining it at 5 months. And part of the problem that we have is, as we've talked about, some of the funds really probably shouldn't be at 5 months. They probably need to be more like 6 months, because that particular fund strictly relies on property taxes. And as the cycle goes, in May, we have a problem. And so, you know, we've been doing interfund loans on a temporary basis, but again, that's not healthy to do. That we shouldn't have to do interfund loans in order to support those funds. So I think 5 is a good number as a general number. Some probably should be more like 6, but ultimately the key is, you know, as they say, a soft landing, right? We're taking that down back to the 5 months, but we got to be very careful about how we get there, because the problem is if you continue down the path that we're currently going down, and not to take your thunder a little bit, but all the ARPA spend that we had, we're going to go past 5 months and not have a way to get back to 5 months, because we won't be able to generate enough revenue in order to get us back to 5 months. So that only conclusion at that point is we're going to have to make cuts in programming in order to get back there. So again, it's just simply an awareness of how we go about doing that.
Ms. Greeno?
So I'm going to bring this up because we're on this slide, and you said, you know, to talk about it, the slide. And I know that there's different types of models for different type of businesses, but I'm more of a 6-month person in business and personal. However, what makes me uncomfortable is you talk about the increase in personnel and personnel costs. And so that would be something that I would think needs to be looked at, and we've already discussed that. And I know that this is something that's happened at the federal and state and local level. And again, it goes back to why. Is it something that's been mandated? Is it something that's happened in different elected departments? And then again, you were talking about these other funds that for some reason did not have the 6 months. We're trying to get that up, brought back up to have the 6-month reserve. So it is something that needs to be looked at, but I hate to say it, but I would be more in when we're doing a reset, getting it reset to 6 months. However, these other factors also need to be corrected. So I just wanted to put that out there. And we're very interested in other perspectives.
Okay, so I guess just building on what you said a little bit, we'll talk about the impacts of the lower general fund reserve, which again, I don't think is necessarily bad. It was a planned spend down, but kind of where do we go from here? So as I mentioned earlier, funds operate in silos, but there's still the relationship that we've been talking about. So for example, the FICA fund. It has not been funded at a level to cover the expenses and has required an advance from the general fund starting at the end of fiscal 23. And we have that fund probably on like a 2 to 3 year payback to the general fund based on the property tax levy. So between the advance and the reduced reserve, it can create some cash flow issues in the general fund only because of all these advances. It also is going to, as the general fund reserve comes down, we're going to have to look at, right now we have about 3.5 months invested. But, as we need more of that cash for operations or to help other funds with their operations, we'll look to probably make that about 3 months with then maybe a very short-term investments.
So that means lower interest. You got to say that's what that means, because we're not investing the money for as long, and we're not, as you know, shorter term borrowing sometimes is less rate than a longer term. So, yes, Pam.
What's the average of our investment term now?
Your microphone, please.
Thank you. What's the average term of our investments now?
You mean the
term?
length?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's based on what Donna Kurtz decides to do. So she gets presented with different scenarios and, as far as investment opportunities.
Yeah.
At different lengths. And I think she then works with either Carrie or the department head or whoever to figure out when they're going to need that money so that she can invest it the best she can.
Okay, so I'm going to ask again. I understand that, because that's what they do with senior services dollars as well. But is there an average, when you look back, when we take all of those considerations and variables into consideration, is there an average in there? Do we typically do, if I took all that information, does it come out to 6 months? Does it come out to 3 months? Is it more of a year?
You know what, I can get that information from Donna, but I would
I'd be
say
interested.
the portfolio, because she has invested general fund, ARPA, Valley High, and then a couple of the highway funds and senior services.
Yeah.
So really it depends on the fund. So senior services, the cash flow is much smaller and it's more just like a 1 year. So those might even be CDs. But the general fund portfolio, she has multiple investments over multiple, yeah.
And she
She
manages
ladders
that,
them.
and she manages that well. I'm going to
She
give her
does a
kudos
great
from,
job, and
yeah, from the
she's-
top to the
yes.
bottom. I was just trying to get a feel on how ultimately a shorter period of time might ultimately affect our overall flow, is what I was kind
Well,
of.
and again, we're going to be getting less interest just because interest rates are going down.
Right.
So, we were making much better interest dollars back 2 years ago when the rates were higher, and now we're not so much. But Donna would have to provide that because I don't really know.
Could we ask her for that for maybe like the last 18 months or something?
Yes, I can ask
If
her.
if that's not a huge time commitment.
But I think that's an important point too, because right now, bank interest is not awful. So, as we pull some of that money out of investments and put it in the bank, we're still getting Donna's getting a good return on that money. But when you're selling an investment that has a yield of 5% that we know we're going to get for the next 4 years, that's where it becomes, now it's okay, but, in 2 years, then it becomes an issue or, less of an opportunity.
And we really don't want to break that investment early because then we get really screwed. So, the planning part is really critical to that as to the cash need versus what she invests in.
And since the levy right sizing several years ago, really each year when we look at the total extension, we've been focusing on the funds outside of the general fund that are the least healthy. So if you remember in prior years' discussion, it was highway fund, tort fund. So those were the funds that were also having, well, not the tort fund. The highway fund was also having to borrow money to make payroll come May. So we really kind of shifted some of the levy to those funds to rebuild their balance. And the highway fund is now right at 6 months. But I feel like, once highway and tort is fixed, it was a little bit at the expense of FICA, IMRF, VAC. So now we're doing a shift to those. And building on what Mike said, if we want the general fund to be at 5, then we really need these property tax levy funds to be at 6. And FICA right now is at a -1. And IMRF is right at 6. But again, it's budgeted to use its fund balance, so that number will probably come down to 5 months. VAC, yes. Smaller. It's much smaller, and it's actually it's its own separate fund, but it's in the general fund bank account, so that's why there's no interfund loans. But again, we need to make sure that whatever money they need for their operations, we're providing for them without having to take money from the general fund. Really operating like this with reduced levy prevents us from having levy funds that are all healthy. That's really the point of this slide, so.
Ms. Greeno?
So is the only fund that's below FICA?
FICA and VAC.
But VAC's in general, so it's kind of hard.
Well, it's still its own fund.
Okay.
So we don't have to do interfund loans because each fund has its own bank account for the most part. So when FICA, we can't make payroll, we actually have to transfer money from the general fund bank to FICA. Whereas VAC, we track it separately, we know it's in a deficit, but we don't have to do the interfund loans.
Okay, so it's 2 out of the 43?
So IMRF, I think, will be below 6 months at the end of this fiscal year.
Okay.
So those are just the levy funds. The other 40...
That'd be 3 out of 10, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah. Okay. The other funds, it's a little bit difficult. And in the fund balance policy that was passed in January, we don't like to say these special revenue funds all have to be at 6 months because it really depends on the fund. Some of the funds are pure project funds, so they don't have operating type personnel type expense. So you might see their fund balance increase because they're saving up for a particular project, and then it'll go down. So the specific language in the policy just says enough for the fund to cover its annual operating expenses. But each of the 43 are very different. And as you can see on this slide, so in the financial statements, there's actually a section, it's kind of near the end, where it lists out each of the special revenue funds, which I think is really a good way to see in one spot all of the special revenue funds. First off, how big are they or small? What the revenue is, what their expenses is, what their fund balance is. So the other governmental funds, so this would be everything except for the enterprise funds and the general funds, they actually have had, in total, an increase in their fund balance. And so what I did down here are these 5s. This is a subset of the 131,000. 131 million, thank you. The top 3 are the 3 that have seen the most growth, and the bottom 2 are the 2 that have seen the biggest decline. And so this top one, the county option, this is the one that's, their revenue is based on the county option tax that was increased to 8 cents, and that's on an index that you guys increased to 8 cents last year? Yeah. And so that's on an index. And so then the RTA sales tax, we've seen strong sales tax revenue. And then the motor fuel tax, you can see here the state increased the motor fuel tax, so that fund has been growing steadily. So the 2 at the bottom, again, are ones that their source of revenue is all property tax, and this is where we're seeing the decline. So this is what I mean when I said IMRF most likely at the end of 25 will not be at 6 months. But we try to look at all of the funds to make sure, at least 2 years out, how we think they're gonna be functioning, and then make corrections. Because the property tax cycle, it takes a couple years if there's a fund that's unhealthy. Any questions on this one?
Pete's favorite slide.
So what this slide is, and I think this is a really good visual of the work that has been accomplished by the board, by the county. So this is just the McHenry County share of the property taxes. So you can see in fiscal year 2017, we were levying just under $80 million. And so last year, we were at just under $65 million. So each of these, the colors represent a particular levy. So you can see this orange one is mental health, and that's how we removed it. We removed it in this, so that's part of this reduction. But even if you take this number minus the mental health number, we're still at a reduced levy over the past 9 years, and that's amidst inflation, merit increases, all the other increases. So I think this is a really good visual to show people when they say, why are my property taxes so high? It's
It ain't us.
right. The part that you control, yeah. The part that you control, has seen a reduction. But I think we're to the point now where we have to start focusing on some of the things that we know are coming. The past couple of years I've been saying, like, 23 is okay, 24 is okay, 25 is okay, 26 and 27 are going to start be challenging. So, looking ahead to 26. So, Finance Chair Scala kind of challenged us in the Finance Department to come up with a preliminary budget in June, which is the earliest we've done it. So the first thing that we look at...
He accepted the challenge.
So the first thing that we have to look at, so outside of RTA, this is a sales tax, so we include it on this, but all the rest of these, and then the portion of the property tax, all the rest of these are general fund revenues. And so this makes up about 70% of the general fund revenues, so that's why we focus on these major ones. And so, the state is about 3 months behind when we receive our sales tax distributions. So this is just what it is today. It's hard to do really great trends off of 3 months, but as we get new information, we'll be looking at this all summer. If we think we're gonna be stronger in sales tax, maybe that will affect something else. So again, it's just where we're at today, our best starting point.
Well, so go back. So this is something that we haven't in the past looked at, we start looking at it typically like in August, because you have usually some pretty good data there. The problem with looking at it this early is, you have, like, let's just take sales tax. So in these numbers are the Christmas season, right? So if you were to statistically just take that and say, okay, well, I got 3 months and multiply that times 4, it's going to give you some false data. So you really kind of got to manipulate the numbers based on known information like Christmas and how that has construed into what we have here. So I don't want to say it's a stretch, but I mean, it's taking our best estimates with all the data and information that we have. And this will continue to be refined month after month. But again, Carrie accepted the challenge to try and figure this out as best, we could as of right now.
And Dr. Sager has a question as well.
Yes, when we're looking at the county sales tax, we're looking at the 1/4% sales tax, RTA sales tax. Is this net after what is required for servicing by the state, or is this gross?
That's not.
Yes. We see the number on the reports that the state sends us, but
It's what we actually
I mean, they don't even send it to us and then we have to send it back. So we just,
But this is the net. This is
Yep.
what
Correct,
we
yes.
actually receive after the service.
After they take their portion?
Yes.
yes.
Yeah, that's correct.
Right. Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
Give to Caesar what is Caesar,
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you.
Local use. So there is a reduction in local use. And so that is the internet sales tax, which I think starting in July was shifted to the regular sales tax lines. So part of our challenge has been, how do we trend these sales tax numbers when, there's been a fairly significant change. So again, that's why you see these, yeah. Okay, on the expense side, some of our challenges in fiscal '26.
Mr. Shorten, you had a question?
Oh,
Yeah, if we can go back, sorry. The LGDF, is that what we're supposed to get or what we actually get?
which number?
LGDF.
That is, so the actual numbers, 22, 23, 24, those are actuals, then the budget, and then that's what we've received so far, the annualized number. But again, we will be refining that all summer because it's a little hard when we don't have all the months.
Yeah, thank you. Pete?
But we do know that there hasn't been a significant increase from Springfield for LGDF funding, correct?
If the question is what we're supposed to get when the states several years ago committed 10% to LGDF. Of course, when the state increased property tax statewide from 3 to whatever is 4.9, that number was reduced. And so it moves every year. It's like super nominal increase this year. But so if that's what you mean by supposed to get, it's not 10%.
Right. Okay, thank you.
So we talked a little bit earlier about personnel. So in the numbers that you're going to see coming up, we built in 3.25 for the non-union merit increases, and then next year, I know Suzanne's like, there will be 5 union contracts up for negotiation, which, you know, I assume we'll see some type of increase as well. Some of our
Yeah, do we have an estimate on what cost of living is going to be?
What?
2.9.
Thank you.
So some of the challenges we're seeing for 26, jail healthcare costs. I know the sheriff right now is working on some different options for delivery of this healthcare. So however he decides to move forward with that, we may see some short-term increases, or if we stay with the same model, the contract is up, so we will definitely see some increases there. The ARPA projects that we've been talking about for several years.
Remember how I keep on talking about that number that keeps popping up, and I'm like, we're going to have to deal with this. We're going to have to deal with this. We're going to have to deal with this. It's reoccurring expenses that ARPA's paying for. We're going to have to deal with this. Hey, that time is now.
Yeah. Well, 26 is the last year for ARPA. So next year it's going to be about $3 million as of right now that will be moving into the general fund. And that's on services that we either already contracted for or that we have to provide. So like the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement, the election center rent. There's other expenses that I think we can have discussion about if we want to move it to the general fund, but that $3 million is something that has to move to the general fund. And then we have this year.
Ms. Greeno?
To be fair, so for example, when we talked about the election center rent, at that time, there were other costs that were being displaced by getting the election center. So we can go back and look at those to remind ourselves of how we decided to go on ahead with that. You know, what we were paying for storage, because you're looking a little like you don't remember that. So, I mean, we can go back and, I mean, really the thing, because I mean, I remember very clearly that we were careful in every way that we could that it was going to be a project that was ending or that it was a project that was displacing costs that we already had. So as we're looking at those things, let's make sure that we've got that pulled out and that if it's truly something that's an increase, that we've got that at our fingertips so that we remember that. I just don't want to make it appear, especially to new members that won't have that collective memory, you know, where we actually purposefully used ARPA to increase costs because no one ever intended that. And it wasn't something that we were purposefully doing with ARPA money.
So the total cost of what's being funded with ARPA right now that's recurring is probably closer to 4 million. So that 3 million is already a number, as I said, that really the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement was, yeah, that was just, you know, it kind of helped build the general fund cushion a little bit. It's an expense that we have to incur no matter what. The election center, I would say, was more opportunity cost because a lot of the storage was in this building. So there may be some nominal savings because they were moving everything all the time.
Transportation.
Yes. But as far as the contract or the lease, that's something that we're locked into for
7 years.
7 years. Last, our IT costs, we have a new phone lease, Microsoft contracts, a new computer lease that's going from, I think, $500,000 a year to $800,000 for 5 years. And then really, it's all of our capital improvement programs, but the big one next year is going to be these Motorola radios that have to be replaced. So, but to talk more about capital.
Segway.
All right. Thank you, Carrie. For anybody who doesn't know me, I'm Scott Hartman, Deputy County Administrator. Joining me with this part of your presentation is Adam LaChandra, Director of Procurement and Special Services. Finance Chair Scala and Carrie talked quite a bit about, or not me, a little bit on capital projects and capital improvements, and we wanted to take part of this presentation just to give a little bit more information on how that fits into your budget. This is an important chunk of the annual expenditures for the county, so we wanted to give you a little bit of insight on how that functions. All right. So what is a capital plan and how is it funded? Well, capital projects, and you'll hear that term quite a bit as you already have, include tangible and intangible assets that are defined in your fixed asset policy. As you, of course, are aware, on Tuesday you're going to be looking at an amendment to the fixed asset policy. And for those who are keeping score at home, that's item 17.B.2.3 on Tuesday's agenda. But the capital projects cover a lot of commodities and assets we have to purchase. But the capital plan focuses really on those projects and assets, software systems that have a cost of greater than $100,000 in value and a service life of greater than 5 years. As Carrie pointed out, you saw some work in the parking lot out front. That is a good example of a capital project in action. So we're really focusing on those big projects, those big projects that are going to cost a lot up front, but will be with us for quite a while. And when you look at those, and you have so many of those with an organization of this size, it's important that we come up with a plan on how we're going to take on those projects, tackle those projects on a year-to-year basis. So what a capital plan does is it provides a strategic approach to the planning, the financing, and even the coordination of these large projects. And so this essentially allows the county to prioritize those needs and prioritize those needs against the available funding from year to year. And if we know we have a very large project coming up that we have to plan for, it gives you the ability then to strategically finance that project for years ahead, so you're going to have that funding when it hits. And that's just a great practice. That way you're not coming in year to year saying, what do we have to do? It's going to cost this much. Oh my gosh, how are we going to do it? You're strategically planning these projects, and that gives you the ability then to look at these projects in light of all the other operating costs, all the other county needs, so you can ensure that when that need is here and we have to do that project, we're going to be prepared to do so and able to do it without impacting the other county operations. So we typically, in fact, best practice is to finance these projects, which are, let's call them one-time projects, with a one-time revenue source. And a great example of that one-time revenue source that we have been enjoying is the jail revenues. That's a one-time revenue that comes in, and we're using that to finance your capital plan. So I'd like to actually turn it over to Adam so he can give us some insight on what fiscal year 2026 and beyond will look like for the capital plan. Adam?
Thank you, Scott. So now that you know all this good stuff about where it is and that we strategically plan for it, where are we going with it? 2026, all of these that you're going to see now are proposed. Nothing is funded. They're just proposals. They do change. We've got some projected out to 2032, but I'm not going to bore you by going out that far. We're going to take a look at 2026 and really just the next few years. Most of the projects listed here are architectural and engineering work. The lion's share of the cost is for the new radios that you see down here and the police social worker build out. The radios are used for sheriff, DOT, health, and EMA. They're due for replacement. The social worker program is going to be at the Cary training facility. One specific project of note is number 3. This is actually I'm going to say this right, a building HVAC automation project that has the potential to have $200,000 in utility grant rebates, and we've actually calculated we'll have an ROI of approximately 3 years. So moving into 2027, what you see here is you see a continuation of the 2026 plan. Though the plan carries with projects 1 and 2, as you can see here, new engineering for building A that has been proposed. They're new in 2027, but we don't have currently engineering costs to go with all of these, so those would be additional costs going forward. There's some necessary infrastructure projects that you see coming up at the bottom of the list. Crystal Lake Package Rooftop Unit and the jail window sealant and flashing engineering. It's a new project with cost to be determined, but those windows have aged to the point where they actually need to be some replaced and several have new flashing. 2028, the plan moves forward to construction at Building A, as you see in projects 1 and 2, and chiller replacement at the back parking lot with a future determination of what we have to do with the fuel island that's out there. More new planned projects include the construction at Crystal Lake HVAC and engineering for 3 elevators in the jail, and the construction on jail windows, among other projects. So things to watch and some unknowns that we have. This is fairly self-explanatory. We do have a space needs study underway, which is likely to produce new capital projects at the government center and possibly other facilities. We have acquired recently, actually I believe Monday, 400 Russell here in Woodstock. There may be additional capital projects there in the coming years, possibly within the context of the space needs study. And finally, price fluctuations due to economic volatility and potential tariffs. We monitor closely. We do budget an inflationary number, smaller or larger, based on what we know for the capital plan going out several years. Unfortunately, we have started to see issues with tariffs coming in for DOT projects and for the facilities projects. So we'll continue to watch those. Finally, what you have here, you can access the capital plan anytime online. This QR code will take you. I don't know where he went, but apologies to member Scala. He's a numbers guy like I am. But this QR code in particular takes you to the data visualization capital page, not the bar graphs and numbers only capital plan that's also available. This QR code takes you to the project list for the current year, 2025. And should you decide to tap on any of those projects, you might be able to see a map, plan design drawings, engineering scope documents, and pictures if they're available for that project.
Okay, Ms. Althoff has a question.
Yes,
yeah,
well, perfect. I say with that, I'll take any questions.
I was waiting. I was waiting for my turn. And maybe it doesn't fall in a capital, but I think that I looked at the little criteria. What about the conversations we've been having about improving the IT security? I know that that was something that we've talked about at Administrative Services, and it kind of has popped up at a couple other committees. Is there any plans to include that? And I know that that was a large issue that we were concerned about, just from a hacking perspective and governmental data and things of that nature.
Great question, large cost, big issue.
Huge.
It's mostly software. And it's mostly going to be more of a subscription base. So we do look at IT projects if it's more hardware and if the cost rises to that threshold. As of right now, those projects would not be included in the capital plan, but they are being considered on the operational side.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Nope. If not, I'll yield the floor. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Hey, Carrie, welcome to the podium.
Okay, so I have to be honest, this slide it's very preliminary. So what I tried to do is compare where we were at in the fiscal 25 budget development with where we are at in this preliminary budget development. And so that should be the biggest takeaway, is that last year at this point, when we had several of these factors in, we had slightly more revenue than expense. This is just for the general fund. And with the preliminary budget this year, based on the things we just talked about outside of capital, we're starting with revenue slightly less than expense. So what's even a little bit more problematic is this number here, this revenue number, includes the one-time jail revenue and expense. So the net would probably be about maybe 3 million. But it doesn't include anything for capital or anything for supplementals. So for comparison, I made sure that I pulled the capital and the recurring supplementals out of this number as well. But I think the important thing to note is we're already starting with revenue that doesn't cover expenses, no capital funded, no supplementals, and including this jail revenue and expense in that number. And another thing, in talking about the CPI, and Mike mentioned before, if we were at 5 months, at some point we wouldn't be able to levy enough to keep us at 5 months. The calculation is you take the CPI, whatever the number is, and you multiply that by the prior year levy, which is 65 million. So last year, the maximum CPI was 3.4, and we were looking, using that percentage against 71 million, which was the prior year levy, or 71. And so not only it's a smaller number, but the total tax that we're multiplying it against is also a smaller number. So even though 2.9 as a percentage, if that's the number that we end up taking, the amount of money that raises is actually going to be less than we were looking at last year. So that's where we kind of bringing full circle the problem we've been talking about in the out years. How do we sustain, where we're at now? Or maybe it's a combination of looking at revenue and expense, or just expense, or something. But at this point, some decisions have to be made about moving forward. Any questions on that?
Ms. Greeno?
Yes, exactly what are you saying? Are you saying that at this point, some decisions need to be made about what we have to do going forward? So you're telling the board that we have to make a decision on what we're going to do moving forward regarding whether we're going to have a cut in CPI, a zero CPI, or going at less than 2.9% CPI or a 2.9% CPI? Is that what that means?
I don't think you need to make that decision, obviously, today. I think you need to start thinking about is there going to be cuts to non-mandated programs, so we bring down this lower number, or how can we impact this number, also keeping in mind relation to the other funds that we've been talking about. So I think there's multiple.
Okay, so let me just ask this. So we're going into, the Finance Committee meets on July 3rd, and then the COW meets on July 10th, right? Is the next COW?
Sure, it'd be a week later, so.
Yeah, okay, because it's just like, and then when does that decision have to be, realistically, with us wanting to advance the budget discussions, I just want the board to have a picture in their minds of when are we doing the work?
Well,
Is it July, is it August?
So actually, we have a couple departments scheduled to come to Law and Government at the end of June. So I would say that's really when it's going to start, is the committees having more robust discussions with the departments when they present their budgets on what's mandated, what's not mandated, what's expected by the residents, in addition to addressing the revenue side.
Yeah, I think the thing is that To me, what our board purpose is to decide what is the revenue side. We control that, right? And we can decide what that number is. And then, based on whatever that number is, then we have to then decide what expenses are going to fit into that number to have a balanced budget. So that's when, I guess, to kind of answer your question, I'll be looking at the end of this presentation to try and clarify what that revenue side number is so that we as a board know what that is, and then staff knows so that the presentations at committee can then fit into that number. So it's really, on a expense side, we're gonna have to make decisions on where we're going to make cuts in order to fit into that revenue number side.
So you said that you're looking at the end of this presentation to give feedback to the departments?
No, well, I mean, we can cut to the end, but in essence, at the end of this, I'm gonna have you fill out a little survey that we're gonna talk about, but that survey is gonna say what numbers, based on our budget policy, what numbers are we coming up with on our revenue side? Once we've kind of clarified that, this is going back to so that we're providing clear direction to staff, then when they start doing their presentations to the different committees, that's when we're looking at mandated, unmandated programs, or where are we gonna make those cuts to fit this in? Because that's really what it's gonna, as Carrie's pointing out here, just preliminary, again, it's 3 months worth of data in some instances, so this is preliminary, but we're already starting from behind the 8 ball type scenario. Mm-hmm. So I want our committee meetings to be much more realistically based on what the expectations are of this board, right? Mm-hmm. And it's ultimately up to us. So, if whatever department comes forward and says, hey, we have these 3 programs that we're doing right now that are not mandated by anyone, county has decided to do them, to me, that goes on a list that ultimately we'll have to decide whether we want to continue to fund those or not. And to me, I'm going to be relying on committee members, the rest of you, to kind of value judge those things, because I'm not going to be in your committee meeting, but you're going to have to say, God, this program is really worthwhile. It helps out a lot of people. Or this, whatever we're doing, is important for our county and the growth of our county. We really shouldn't be cutting that. This one, and that's the kind of value judgment that we have to be making.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Kunkel?
Mike really just said what I was going to say. We have to look at where we're going to make cuts. Cuts to services, cuts to staff. That affects our FICA, that affects our reserves, affects everything. If there's no other option and these expenses that we have are fixed, mandated for a certain point, cuts, that's where we're at. Especially if we don't want to raise the taxes again to McHenry County residents. Thanks.
Yep. Mr. Collins?
Thank you. So I just want to make sure I'm clear on this, and everybody else is. What that's saying on the FY 2026 side is that any of the 2026 capital projects that were just presented would not happen. Be no supplementals, so once the budget's set, we would spend no additional monies or dollars at all in 2026. And that is assuming we take the full CPI.
That's what the preliminary numbers would be saying. Yes.
And we have to cut even before we do anything else.
Correct.
Okay.
True statement.
Okay, so that means anything that's capital project based in 2026 would have to get pushed to 2027 or 2028, where I'm assuming the same problem is going to exist, that this is being shown here, and it's just going to double up and double up and double up.
This is, yes,
Okay.
that's a correct.
Okay.
And that's what.
So let me just finish. So the challenge here is either we have to cut our way to finding all this money and start with probably non-mandated programs, and or decide these projects are necessary, and we have to raise some taxes in order to get this stuff done.
Well, I guess the point is we can't raise enough money to do everything.
Sure.
Plain and simple, this is what this should be showing you. We can't, even if we were to take new growth and take all of CPI, because CPI is a smaller number than, on a smaller number, so not only CPI number lower, but it's on the multiplier from the previous year is smaller. So even if we were to take 100% of CPI this year, it'd be less than the total CPI dollars we took last year. And we didn't take 100% of the CPI last year. So it just, I don't want to say, I know this is going to sound bad, but like, you know, we kind of screwed ourselves because the CPI number is on a smaller multiplier, right? So even though you were to say, hey, I took 100% of it, it's still generating a smaller revenue number for us. And that's never going to change. That's a permanent decision that we all made, but it has impacts long term.
Thanks.
Ms. Van Hoff?
Yes, thank you, Chair. My question is in regard to the ARPA funds. So just correct me if I'm wrong. Those have all been allocated, or they needed to be allocated by the end of this year. Is that correct?
So ARPA had to be obligated by December of '24.
Okay.
And fully spent by December of '26.
26, okay.
Yes. So all the dollars have been accounted for. We're just spending them down.
Okay, so my question is, I know that we started several programs based on using ARPA funding. So
When you say we, do you mean county or outside county?
The county,
Okay, okay.
the county. We took on several programs here that were funded by ARPA. And I guess what I would like to know is when they're coming before our committees, let us know which one of these programs were funded by ARPA originally so we can determine whether we're going to continue those. You know, like in some instances, I know that there were additional staff that were hired. There was, you know, funding that was allocated for things because we had the ARPA funds. So those were things that we had said in the future we're going to have to determine whether we have the budget to continue those. So I guess when the departments are coming before us, I would like to know what kind of a project
what
this
revenue
is.
stream was doing that program.
That's right, exactly.
Okay.
And you know, I think when there was a lot of discussion about which projects to fund, especially on the county side, I think the board was very thoughtful in this money is going to come to an end. So there's not a lot of programs within the departments that are reliant on ARPA. Like, we really have tried to keep it.
Not reoccurring ones.
Correct.
We were very careful not to.
Correct, to keep them separate. I mean, there are some positions that we can talk about. I can send them to you. But a lot of them, you know, we tried to just make them one-time costs.
And the ones, the awards that went to outside agencies, it was designed so that they'd be self-sustaining going forward once the county's allocation expired.
Correct.
There was a big one with software, and I can't remember specifically which department it was.
That's what we were talking about earlier, the Microsoft Enterprise Agreement. And I think that was, you know, we can delay paying for this out of the general fund. That was kind of the thought process with that one versus, you know, a one-time cost that's, you know. So it really did help the general fund reserve because we weren't paying it out for the past 4 years.
Absolutely.
But that one is definitely going to have to come back.
Okay, thank you.
So again, I'll just touch on this quickly because I think we've talked a lot about it. Just thinking about, because one of the things, the number on the prior for the revenue for the general fund, you know, again, it's only June, it's really hard. So when you look at the total extension and then you try to divide it out into which levy needs it, you know, really the general fund is getting less money from the total extension because these three need more money. So again, it's just kind of keeping in mind how, you know, the difference between fund and budget and levy, you know, and how they're separate, but also to how they can, the relationship between them. Okay, so some ideas, again, we've talked a lot about it, is, you know, looking at some of the fees specifically in P&D, the sheriff's office, the highway, which affects the highway fund, not the general fund, but that's also a levy fund. Some changes in programs that Mike was talking about, and then increasing the levy and shifting the total extension within the 10 levies. So the 2.9 CPI, you know, what exactly does that mean, and what does new growth mean? So the dollar increase for new growth right now, we have estimated at $825,000. Again, that may change. And then the value of 2.9 CPI, which is again, based off of the 65 million, is 1.8. So the total increase of 2.7, that would be the max.
So just new growth is based on 150 million of new growth here in the county. So
130.
Was it 130? Mm-hmm. Okay, 130 then. And just so you know, I mean, so that's you understanding where we're getting this dollars from. We're saying that there was roughly 130 million in new growth. Alex, you know, has Alex kind of confirm that, or, I mean, he kind of he thinks that's a good number? It's an estimate. Yeah, it's an estimate, so, yeah. So, just as an FYI.
Mr. Collins?
Oh, I'm just gonna say, so real quick, so max, if we were to take everything we are entitled to, it's 2.7 million. That's it.
So, bear with me as I try to ask this question. Of our budget, 270 million, some of that is the courts, the state's attorney, the sheriff, that we don't necessarily have direct control over. They're gonna ask for a certain amount of money, we're gonna push back a little bit, but at the end of the day, they're elected officials and they're gonna come up with a budget number, correct?
Well, even though they're an elected official, they have the autonomy, but we're approving their budget. I mean, we control the purse strings. If that's what you're asking, but.
Well, correct, but the budget numbers that we directly can say yay or nay to is how much out of that 270 million that we have direct control over?
What wouldn't we have
so
control over?
So ultimately, you have control over, yeah, outside of VAC, but
okay.
You set the budget for all funds.
No, I recognize that.
But the general fund is about 106
okay.
of the 170, or 270. Is that what you're at?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, all right, that's what I just want to confirm, thanks. Okay.
Hey, Pete, slide again.
So since this is a crowd favorite graph, this just shows what that would look like. And again, these are estimated as of what we know right now based on how the levy would break out. But just to show again, even taking the full increase, you know, still is a significant reduction from 10 years ago.
Hey, it's time to provide some direction. So, I have some sheets that are going to be handed out to you. And on those sheets are 5 boxes or 5 items, line items, that show, based on budget policy, providing directions. So I'm just going to... so they are based on budget policy, and you can each board members take. So it's option 1 is reduced by 3% from last year. So that is a complete reduction. 2 is take no new growth and no CPI. 3 is take only new growth. 4 is to take new growth and some CPI, similar to what we did last year. And then 5 is take new growth and all of CPI. And what I am asking you to do, I don't want your name on it. I don't want to know who's filling it out. I just simply want you to check one of the boxes about where you're at currently. I'm not this is not a, written in stone. This is just simply, I'm getting a flavor of where the board sits based on this presentation. Once you have those, just throw them at my seat, and we'll continue to go through the rest of the meeting, and then I will tell you guys where everyone kind of fell on this. I think
Today.
there's, go ahead?
Today.
Today, yeah, yep. After we're done going through the regular committee, full board agenda stuff. I want to be very aware that I think there needs to be a realization, right? So if I were to check reduced by 3% from last year, and let's just say there's, whatever, 4 of those, the realization is those 4 people are probably not going to want to vote for anything further down that list, right? And so, again, it's coming up with 10 votes, right, from all of us. And the objective is to try and not get this all the way to November, and provide direction for staff. So I want you to be kind of honest with yourself and the rest of us. That's why I'm asking for this to be anonymous. I don't really want to know who voted for what. I'm just looking, because the more we can be honest and provide clear direction to staff, the more information and better prepared we will be then to look at the full budget as we continue to go through the months. As Terry pointed out, to me, this is going to continue to be a conversation for the next couple months. It's going to be at the committee level based on departments coming in. But then as soon as that's done, it's us getting back together again at some point and having that further discussion and having some input by all of you to figure out where we're truly going. And we can fill this out again, and then, because now you'll have a clear idea of, okay, what's mandated, what's non-mandated, and we can share all that, and we can share what, again, at committee level, programs that, we're thinking, okay, we probably need to cut this, but then other people are gonna be like, well, do you really realize what of an impact that's gonna have? And those aren't easy discussions, but that's why there's 18 of us that get paid the big bucks to make these decisions, right? And as hard as it is, we have to be realistic with all of the people that we represent in the county about the direction that we're going and provide some information. And, again, realization, if we decide that we're gonna cut something, more than likely all the people that's impacting are gonna come here and be like, how dare you cut whatever it is you're cutting, And that's a realization that we have to face. But again, sometimes you have to make difficult decisions, right? That's what we're here for. So unless there's other questions, then we're gonna continue on, I think.
Brian? Mr. Sager?
Thank you, Chairman. To you, Mike, and to Carrie, to Scott, to Adam, Peter, Chairman Bueller, with regards to this presentation today, I just want to say brilliant, and I thank you very, very much.
Okay. You're very welcome. I wore my money shirt just for this presentation, so.
Ms. Saltoff, sorry I skipped you.
No, that's quite all right. And I'm going to sound like a broken record, and I actually commented on the money shirt. For those of us that constantly are looking at ways to reduce taxes, I think we better start with ourselves first. I know I sound like a broken record, but I definitively, and thank you, Mr. Gottemeyer, Chairman of the Administrative Services Committee, who has already agreed, this county board receives benefits. I want to look at those. It's a cost to the taxpayer. And if we can't reduce what we get, then we shouldn't be talking about what we reduce for programs to provide services to the people we were elected to represent. So I want to look at particularly the health insurance coverage. Do not object to individuals gaining access to that coverage. I object strongly to the fact that the county is paying for that access. That's one way we can start reductions. Thank you.
Thank you again to Carrie and all the people that worked on this. It wasn't just me, so it was really just her. But anyways, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, do any members have items from next Tuesday's agenda they'd like to remove for discussion? Mr. Smith.
Yeah, thank you. In the zoning petitions, 10A1, and in the routine consent agenda, 17B21.
17B21. Anyone else? Seeing none? Mr. Smith, 10A1.
Thank you. Just a little backwards on this, because 17B21 affects 10A1. So I was going to ask Adam to talk about 17B21, the reclassification of the zoning officer, because I got a couple questions for Adam this morning that I would have normally been asking for Renee, but we don't have a Renee anymore because Adam's taken over those responsibilities. Adam, you want to comment on that, please, for a minute?
Sure, yeah. So I am taking over those responsibilities. So the zoning enforcement officer has obviously oversight for that division. We are looking at kind of a restructure based on need, and zoning petitions are sky high, reports, et cetera, trying to hit those deadlines. So when we were looking at specifically this division restructuring, we looked at staff needs, and that's where we went. So I'm here for the zoning petitions. I know, Larry, you mentioned one question. I don't know if anybody else has any, but I mean, there's a couple of highlights. I don't know how far you want me to go into those, Larry, but probably we need the bodies tied to the budget. It's about a $20,000 budget reduction in terms of staffing.
That's fine, Adam. I just wanted to let people know why I'd be asking these questions of you. And I think you did a great job restructuring the department, and I don't anticipate any question passing that resolution. Regarding the zoning, 10A1, I did have a couple questions, and actually some extra ones came up during the public comments. So there was a public comment, I heard that the site plan was amended after the public hearing. Did that happen?
So we had similar questions come in to us as well. The site plan itself was amended. It was amended to include an overall aerial or an overall view of the site plan, but the legal description was not amended, and that is what counts. So the conditional use is for the entire site. There is a representation on the official site plan that it shows a gold ring around the building and then a green shade for the rest of the site. The conditional use area is for the whole site. So it applies for that. It was not revised to incorporate or change that boundary.
Okay, thank you. And my second question was, do we have a formal letter of objection from the Heartland Township? I didn't see it in the packet, if we do.
It should be in the packet. I will verify between now and Tuesday whether or not a formal letter came in. All of our objections, emails, et cetera, everything gets swept together and should be in.
Okay, thank you.
But yeah, I will verify.
And then my third question was, we had a slaughterhouse in Marengo a few years ago with a lot of objections to it. Have we had any complaints on that at all?
We did have, during the course of construction, there was a complaint that came in and it was unfounded.
But since it's been up and running?
Since it's been up and running, we have not had any complaints in P&D. That was one question I got in advance. So I did had Patty Noem is here with the Environmental Health Department. I don't know if health is
If Patty wants to comment, that's fine. If you tell me there's,
either.
If there's no issues, then there's, okay, thank you, Patty.
Sure. We've had a total of 3. We had one that we generated ourselves, which was a tracking device to ensure the waste strength testing that's required was done. We had one in 2022 related to animals being outside the building and the manure handling. So we did that. These have all been resolved. That was resolved, and that was also referred on to the Department of Agriculture. And we had one in 2023 related to noxious weeds.
Okay, but all resolved.
All resolved.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Mr. Gottemoller?
Yeah, just so everybody understands the difference. A township objecting to a zoning petition or a variation, which is not before us, neither of those things are before us, would require a supermajority vote. Under state statute, a conditional use does not change the vote. So that's why the votes, when you read your agenda and it says how many votes are necessary to pass, even though there's an objection there, it doesn't require a supermajority vote by state statute.
Thank you. Ms. Altoff?
Mr. Wallen, I understand that this is going to be a new construction on this site, correct?
Correct.
And the conditional use is only for 10 years, correct?
Correct.
And the petitioners understand that that conditional use is good for 10 years.
I certainly hope so, yes, because that's what it would be for, yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Ms. Greeno?
I hope that this would be the time and place to just make any comments or get any clarifications that I might need on this slaughterhouse.
Yes.
Okay, so my understanding is that in our county that there have been backlogs of up to 18 months just to get schedules for people to get meat processed in our area. Because, backlogs and have to go out of state.
From planning development side, yes, we've heard similar things.
I've been made aware of that, and that there are only 50 USDA meat processing plants in the United States. So there does seem to be a monopoly on that. So that there are some real benefits to having local meat processing plants, which was really brought to bear during COVID. And in situations like that, that you may not have access to meat locally. And then also the reduced carbon footprint of being able to access, and have transport, and the cost of local meat being available. And that also when you reduce the scale, and this is a 9,000, I have a commercial 10,000 square foot building. It's not really that large of a facility. And that this can be much more humane in handling the process for the animals. And as far as an animal welfare, this is considered highly preferable to the large facilities. And then the demand, being able to have this access, it's preferred in the industry. So those are the things that I found. I'm very interested. I have been reading the input that I've been receiving from people and the constituents. So I just wanted to make these comments of things that I've been finding, looking into it, and I am interested in knowing and understanding what's going on. Thank you.
Ms. Campbell?
I just wanted to get clarification. We had the attorney for the supervisor come up and say that he was representing and saying that the township itself was in opposition. And I know we had an issue before when a member of a board came up, but my question would be, did the trustees for the township pass a resolution objecting, or is it simply the supervisor, or what? I don't know if, Adam, you have that information?
I don't have knowledge of that, but we can look into it.
Okay.
We'll try to verify that before Tuesday.
Whether it's the whole township board. Thank you.
Mr. Kunkel?
Like all businesses in McHenry County, if they meet our criterion, they follow their licensure and follow their rules, we should not hinder commerce in any way in McHenry County. It's 14 more jobs.
Dr. Sager?
Thank you, Chairman. I would be very interested in confirmation with regards to the township position. And I say that because of, in the past, I have stood up strongly for local units of governments having the ability to plan, if you will, within certain planning areas. And I realize townships are different than the municipalities. I'm fully aware of that. But I do have a concern in that regard. So I will take that strongly into consideration. Thank you.
Mr. Scala?
Just curious, is there anything preventing us from changing the length from 10 years to something different?
No, the board can put on any number of conditions, including extensions or changing that duration of the conditional use permit.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Van Hoff?
Just to comment on Dr. Sager's comment, I believe I heard someone say that they had 400 signatures on a petition opposing that. Yeah.
It was not part of the testimony, or I don't think, or part of the hearing, so.
No, it was not. I think it was submitted, or it was part of the verbal testimony, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay, seeing no further comments, Pete, you got a report for us today? Actually, after you, if Mr. Scala's ready, we can announce the results of the survey. Do you want to take that first?
I'm missing 4 from the room here, so if you didn't.
There were 3 online. Did we?
Yeah, we got
online?
those. It's okay. I won't even look. I'll go like this real quick. There you go. Okay, there you go. All right, so go ahead, have Pete while I do these.
Mr. Gottemoller, did you have a comment you wanted to make?
Just one item that people should be aware of, and that is in the next day or two, you're going to get a draft copy of the strategic plan that we all worked on. Administrative Services went through that last week and trimmed down the changes. And I know that staff went back to Northern Illinois University to have them put the final touches on it. It doesn't mean it's final that we can't change it, but final to give it to everybody to take a look at.
Final draft.
So final draft should come to your mailboxes in the next few days.
Okay, thank you.
It won't be on the agenda this coming Tuesday. It won't be on the agenda till July, but we just wanted to let you know
It'll be coming back to committee in July?
It depends a little bit on what the comments are. I'm sure it'll come through us at least to come forward, but I don't know how much more we will change on it at that point.
Okay, thank you. Pete, report?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It'll come to Administrative Services just to advance onto the full board is what I think, but I don't think you're gonna see a lot of changes at this point. So thanks for that. And thanks again one more time for Carrie and Mike and Adam and Scott and notably Kathy. That was a really cool looking presentation.
Could you pull your microphone to you a little bit more, Pete?
So I just want to thank everybody for that. I gave you a written report, emailed it out last night, and it's on your desk. I just want to draw your attention to 3 items in particular. Again, and Nicole left the room, but in GIS now, we presented a resolution to have an intergovernmental agreement with Wonder Lake. We did one with Woodstock last month, and just really proud of those agreements and kind of expanding our resources to help our municipalities. You also note in the report, Tom Burrows is suggesting that we're going to, if weather conditions hold, we're going to be 6 weeks ahead of schedule with this parking lot construction. Awesome. And it's just been fantastic for me to kind of sit in a fishbowl and watch all this. I appreciate dealing with the construction this morning, but it's really going well and fun to watch. And then finally, and importantly, in the section on procurement and special services, Adam has kind of got a lengthy description in there of what's happening right now with fiber. And there's some exciting things happening with fiber as dollars are being set to be released. But there's also some issues we have to watch, and there's kind of a pause now on the dollars, and things are moving around in Washington as we're trying to make sure that this administration's direction is aligning with the dollars and how they're coming out in the community. So we're going to be watching that over the next 30 days. But it's kind of a more lengthy description in there than we usually have in this service in this report. But I'd ask you to take a look at that as well, and then we'll have follow-up questions next month, I'm sure. So thank you.
Okay. Mr. Scala, you need a drum roll?
Probably not. Okay, so just going through total numbers of each of the different scenarios. Reduced by 3% from last year. There were 6 for that. Take no new growth and no CPI, 2. take only new growth 4, take new growth and some CPI 5, and take new growth and all of CPI 1. And that totals 18. So I think based on that information, I definitely would really like the department heads to bring forward to committee the all of the mandated and non-mandated programs that are in each of those departments. And if they are, regardless of mandated or non-mandated, you know, a cost associated with how that budget rolls up for that. You know, and then also I think what would be critical would be the personnel side of those programs regarding numbers. And then I think what we'll probably need to do is have a meeting after all of these committee meetings are done and kind of flush through what was mandated, what isn't mandated, what is that total as far as dollars, and, you know, including the personnel side of it. And then start having discussions further as, you know, us as a full board about the direction we want to go. Again, this is just, it's preliminary based on what you saw today. But I think this does help a lot to provide direction to both staff and the department heads. So I want to thank you very much for entertaining this.
Okay, thank you much. With that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Mr. Scala?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Makes the motion. Ms. Greeno, seconds. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Have a good day.